Hello everyone, SirMonkeySuit as Happy here, back again with Attack on Titan Season 4. We are on episode 11, and in the last episode, I thought it was another great one in terms of its sort of layout, if you will. At the time, it felt very kind of sporadic, you know, going back and forth to different moments like in time, but I felt it was really well done in terms of showcasing the vast change in Eren's personality throughout the episode, specifically, you know, that scene where they're all in that sort of train cart, right, and then versus like to what he is now when he's in that, like, you know, in that jail cell. And it all comes down to the sort of facets of Zeke's plan, right, and that basically part of his plan is that, you know, the founding titan has to be passed down again into the royal family and everything like that, so it can be used properly. But, you know, as the Paradise Lot say it, it's essentially sacrificing Historia, and that was basically the you know, the crux of the, like, why Eren is, like, has become the way that he has. And I think that was told to us very well in the scenes with Eren and Hanji, right, on either side. Obviously Eren's in the cell and Hanji's outside of it, and you can tell, like, over the course of these scenes happening, like, Eren's getting more and more pissed off at it, because, you know, as I said in the last video, I think that it's a case of Eren kind of being out of options at this point, and he's having to go through with something that he really doesn't want to go through with, which is why when he grabs Hanji and pulls her against the you know, the bars, the cell bars, that he's basically saying, you know, if you've got any better ideas, then fucking speak up about them, because, you know, like, Eren's at his wit's end in terms of, like, what he can possibly, you know, do. And the one thing that he didn't want to do, he's having to end up doing anyway. So, you know, it's one of those things that's like, you know, like, whether or not the reason why he wants to do things on his own and not include the scouts could be, you know, something down to not wanting to get them involved in also having to sacrifice Astoria, like, almost like he's putting all of that responsibility onto himself, which is, I truly believe that is the reason, like, what it is. You know, I think the purpose of having that train cart scene before going into the next scene where, you know, like, Connie's, you know, kind of acting up a bit and talking about how we may need to kill him or everything, you know, things like that. That I think it's supposed to be, you know, like, the reason why Eren's doing what he is doing is because he doesn't want to get the other people, like, you know, the ones he cares about involved. You know, so yeah, you can tell Eren's just really not happy about the situation that he's in, but he knows that something has to be done. It's the only thing that he can, you know, that he has right now. So yeah, really, really cool though. I really enjoyed that last episode. So yeah, I think we'll just get into episode 11 and continue on with the story. So yeah, nothing else to really talk about. So as always, the reaction will be on YouTube here, but for whatever reason in the future, if it gets taken down for copyright, I will re-upload this as a discussion only video, and the link will be to the reaction will be in the description below. And as always, the link to the full length of this reaction is in the description below as well. So if you want to watch my full reaction and not just the cut 10-minute version, then the offer is there for you. But yeah, it's nothing else to really talk about. So we're going to get in episode 11 of season 4 of Attack on Titan and see what we get. So without further ado, let's go. Good start. Oh, for God's sake! Fuck in hell!
あのままだと殺されるでしょ。あの人はお前を心配してたぞ。悪魔を信じてどうするの？
I'm sure if they were going to kill you, they would have killed you already.
ガビとファルコの声が聞こえた。二人はどこだ？
Deceiver.
なあ、その腕章を外せよ。目立つから。
I think they'll stand out regardless.
普通の住民に意味はわからないでしょ。私はただ捕まって死ぬまでにジークを見つけて問いただしたいだけ。あんたが好きにすればいい。別についてこなくていいから。
ああ、そうかい。好きにさせてもらうよ。じゃあこれ捨てといてやるから。
返せ！私は善良なエルディア人なの。それがないと島の悪魔と同じ でしょ。
何言ってんだお前。
No
おかし
shit.
くなっちまったのか。
じゃあほっといてよ。
Like,
何してるの。
oh fuck, this is
言いたくないです。私たち家が嫌でやっと逃げてこれて。
don't you fucking dare.
そう。お腹空いたでしょ。近くに私の家があるからついてきて。
Because I'm positive that that is the girl that Sasha saved.
ちょっとここで待ってて。
And I swear to God, if she fucking kills her too, I'm fucking.
逃走に使える。私は悪魔と一緒に食事なんてできない。
お前な。
お待たせ。入ってきて。
君たちか。
It
家
is.
出したが
It is.
どうしたか使い。
南方マーレの名前。
A southern Malian
僕たちにでき
accent?
ることがあれ
Really?
ば何でもします。だから数日だけここに泊めてください。
I can't believe she's eaten
疲れてる
under
やろ。
this roof. I can't.
それ食べたら横になっていいけんね。ごめんね。辛いことがあったんやろうに。
いえ、妹がすみません。いただきます。ほら、ミヤも食えって。
Who are the other kids? Like Sasha's cousins then, I guess?
するとあちらが例の観測機でしょうか。
はい。氷瀑石を燃料に用いて実現した世
Whoa.
界初の飛行艇となるでしょう。
So they actually have used it then. They have given them the resources to make that.
その真相は志願しなっから全住民強制退去命令だって。区の再建にリーブス商会は発生したのは兵団だろう。辛い立場なのはわかるよ、ハンジさん。だから目を見て言ってくれ。信じていいって。
すべてはエルディア国民、みんなのためだ。エレンの情報を渡したのは君たちか。ホルガ、ビム、ルイーゼ、新兵の君たちとフロック。
These are the ones that are totally on side with
なんで
Eren,
そんな
right?
ことを。
エレンを解放すべきだからです。彼は何も間違ったことをしていない。
その地ならしが期待通りに機能して我々を救う保証は何もないんだよ。
このまま無意に時間を消費する余裕が我々にあるのでしょうか。
The
この
way
国
is.
を導くのはエレン・イェーガーです。今すぐ彼を解放してください。
That's why they keep them locked up, because they're trying to come up with another way.
君が正しいのかもしれないね。形はどうであれ、私はジークの作戦を完遂するとの決断を下した。すべては私の責任だ。
こういう役には多分順番がある。役を降りても誰かがすぐに代わりを演じ始める。頑張れよ、ハンジ。
I remember that scene.
でも兵器違反は後悔していません。勝利が調査兵団の目的なら規則を守ることは必ずしも絶対というわけではありませんよね。私はあなたに命を救われたあの日からあの時のままです。
Oh shit!
を人の力でねじ
Yeah,
伏
the
せたあなたを
little girl.
分かったのです。力がなければ何も守れないと。ミカサさんが調査兵団に入った理由は何ですか？イエガーさんのためなら彼の自由を。私から言えることは一つ。口を閉じてなさい。
I was just giving her the salute back.
もう大丈夫だ。ミカサ。
Jesus! Oh my god!
下手に動くよりここに根付いた方がいいと思う。
何言ってんの？ジークが憎くないの？裏切り者があんなに近くにいたんだよ。二人ともお昼にしよう。
しかしカヤさんもですけど、ここで働いている人はみんな若いんです
カヤ
ね。
うん。ここにいる人は孤児だからね。女王の方針で行き場のない子供には支援があるから。ここは4年前に親を失っている子供たちの集まりなの。
The
この
orphanage,
島
right?
の民が世界に対して残虐非道の限りを尽くした歴史をお忘れですか？エルディア人一人一人が罪の自覚を正しく持つことでようやく食材への道が開かれるのですよ。
You can't.
マーレでそう教えられてるの？
何やってるみて何言ってんだよ。今なんて言いました？
She
君
knows.
たちはマーレから来たんでしょ？
何してん
swear to...
うまく正体を表した。
Oh my god! Oh my god! I swear to god!
お前ら何暴れてんだ。
ミアがお兄ちゃん取られるって焼きもち焼いてるの。
どうして。
Just keeping them safe, you know?
ここ私が住んでた村。ただここからあそこでお母さんが食べられる音を聞いてた。お母さんはずっと生きたまま食べられてた。音が出なくなるまで叫んだからだと思う。壁の外には人類がいて、私たちを悪魔の民族だって言ってるんでしょ。ミア、ベン、教えて。お母さんは一体何をしたの？何をしたからこんなに恨まれているの？何千年も世界中の人々を虐殺したからでしょ。他の民族の文化を奪って望まれない子を産ませて数えきれないほど人を殺してきたの。
That's not these people's
お母
fault
さんは
though.
この辺で生まれ育ったから。
Exactly. You can't, like, why do you have to atone for the sins of ancestors?
100
It's
年前
not.
あなたたちの先祖が犯した罪の大きさが問題なの。ついこの間だって私の町を蹂躙した。私のお母さんが殺されたのは4年前だから、その罪じゃない。さんは誰も殺してない。ねえミア、ちゃんと答えて。なんでお母さんがあんなに苦しんで殺されたのか。
威力偵察です。4年前のパラディ島侵攻の目的は大攻勢を見据えての威力偵察でした。お母さんには何の罪もありません。ごめんなさい。
ありがとうベン、教えてくれて。でもベンが謝るのはおかしいよ。マーレで生まれただけなのに。
カヤさんはその状況からどうやって助かったんですか？
今
Sasha.
の私より少し年上ぐらいのお姉ちゃんが薪割り用の斧を持って入ってきて巨人相手に戦ったの。姉ちゃんが生きてたら行くあてのないあなたたちを決して見捨てたりしない。私にそうしてくれたように、今度マーレの人が働いてるレストランに招かれてるの。そこにあなたたちを連れて行けばマーレに帰る方法が見つかるかもしれない。どうして？私はお姉ちゃんみたいな人になりたいの。
獣の巨人の死骸を調べた結果、爆破され粉々になったジークの体が部分的に見つかった。見つかる部位はどれも両腕両足のものだ。
Well, he was exploded with a grenade.
我々を欺くために自らを亡き者と装ったのだ。
Wait, how does he know
こ
that?
の対人型に改良された立体起動装置には、
ずっと一緒に戦ってたのに裏切り者だったなんて。
I don't know how Rhino's gonna feel
この
about
まま
this
で
one.
済ますつもりはない。今から半年以内にパラディ島に世界連合軍による
6 months.
掃討作戦を行う。
半年ですか。ファルコとガビの救出も半年後でしょうか。
だがマーレの力のみでパラディ島を攻めても以前のように返り討ちに遭うだけだ。世界連合軍の集結を待つ。
ジークもそう考えるでしょう。そして半年後に潰されるのを策もなしにただ待っている人でもない。
Bloody hell.
世界連合軍を待ってはいられません。今すぐにパラディ島を奇襲すべきです。
Fucking hell. Wow, that's mad. Okay. Okay, episode 11. Wow. Yeah, I bet you there was a lot of people interested in my reaction to this one because of. I mean, the vast majority of the episode was, you know, kind of a weird. It seems as though like this could be the start of a turnaround where Gabby realizes the truth, right? Because this whole like idea about they're all just devils and that like it's this refusal to believe anything, you know what I mean? Because she's been indoctrinated to such a degree that like, you know what I mean, there's no way that these people could be that kind, so they're clearly lying to us, or you know, like it was the whole, you know, like when I said in episode 8 that, you know, like I that I hate her. It was like, of course, the main crux for that was killing Sasha, but it stemmed from earlier in the episode where she refused to even consider what Falco had said, right? Like, when her complete desire for revenge dictates her actions to the point where she treats her friend badly, you know, like, you know, and I have to preface this with, you know, like, an understanding that, you know, right, she's a kid and she is heavily indoctrinated, right? So it's not like, you know, it's tougher for a kid. Kids are hell, like, you know, way more easily influenced, right? And kids generally don't want to admit they're wrong, right? So I need to preface this with that, knowing and understanding that that is just, you know, the thing about it. But, I mean, I've always been someone that says that I hate kids because of the way that they go on and that they can be annoying and fucking, you know what I mean, and that's like just a big part of it as well, that like she acts like a spoiled brat, you know what I mean? I don't like, I despise watching her in this fucking crazy state that is like, it just seems like fucking relentless, you know what I mean? And that's why I think, you know, in case, like, you know, in the case of the actual story, having Falco be the one with her is such a blessing to have Falco there, because he is such a good kid, you know what I mean? And he's got the right way of thinking about things. And, you know, again, I'll preface it with saying that they grew up in different families, right? Falco is a Grice, which, you know, were part of the Eldian Restorationist group, you know, that Grisha was part of, and Grice was his right-hand man, pretty much, right? You know, so growing up in a completely different environment, I think that was something that was like heavily, you know, like it was a heavy topic in this episode, I think, was the idea of how they grew up and their experiences growing up can, you know, shape a person to how they are as people. And when I talk about, you know, Falco being such a good kid and having the right way of thinking about things, is that he has this perspective that is purely, you know, different to each individual person. He doesn't judge people based on a collective, which is what Gabby does. And I think that's the main issue that I have with her, is that she's completely wrong in the things that she is saying. Like, you know, she believes that, you know, descendants of Eldians have to atone for the sins of their ancestors. But that is ridiculous. Why should people be punished based upon people that they don't even know? You know, like, that's ridiculous. And at this point in time, I'm not even saying at this point in time. Across the whole show, you know, we've been told, like in season 3 and stuff, that it sounded so much like propaganda that a lot of it could be fake, you know. We still don't know the truth of exactly what happened, right? We've been told that that's what it is, but, you know, because of the difference in perspective, it's so easy to just claim that, you know, things are the way that they are because a story was made and people started believing it. I guess the one, the credibility, I guess, comes from the rest of the world, right? Because they seem to say that, you know, the same things and whatnot, you know. But regardless of whether or not it was all true and the Eldians were people who wiped out cultures and everything like that, you can't blame people way down the fucking line that were never a part of it. You know what I mean? Because it's not like this. It's not like an inherent evil that resides in the Eldian people. I mean, even Gabby. I mean, this is the thing. The sort of the fallacy with it. The sort of the way of her thinking, right? This collective, like, sort of thing that she's going for, where Eldians need to atone for the sins of their ancestors, right? So she thinks that, you know, the people who live on Paradise that are devils, right, is somehow like it comes with an inherent nature to it. It's not something that they become, it's something that they are as a people. But what she doesn't seem to realize is that they are the same people. You know, like they are the same race of people that grew up in different places. And I think this is why, like, you know, originally I was worried that we got a name now, Kaya, and that, you know, it was basically Sasha's family that Gabby and Falco, the one place it had to be. I was worried, and I was like, oh god, because that was relatively early on in the episode, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's like I'm gonna burst a blood vessel here, you know. Because if there's any fucking place that I didn't want Gabby to be, it was sitting, having fucking food with Sasha's family. But the end of this episode is so good with Kaya. And her way of thinking is just like... Ugh. In terms of story, like, to have Kaya be the one to almost put things right in Gabby's head. Now, obviously, it would be stupid if Gabby was now completely, you know, changed, you know, entirely. But it's the seed that was planted that is the you know, the most important thing there. You can't just change someone's mind like that. It just can't be done, right? It's not realistic. So it's a seed that has been planted that can now grow, and eventually, hopefully, Gabby will understand, right? But yeah, I mean, having Kaya there was really... to have her plant that seed, I feel like is, you know... I think it's, you know, it's ironic, of course, but it's, you know, I think it is definitely interesting. Especially her as a character, because I didn't know, like, if she was even going to be... I thought, like, that maybe, you know, in episode 9, when we saw her at the grave, I thought that was just like a little, oh, you remember her? You know? She now is part of, you know, Sasha's uncle's family. So, you know, I thought it was just like one of those things. I didn't think she was going to have a bigger part to play, but like this is, it's huge because it allows character development in Gabby, which is what I'm hoping for. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, she's still going to have to do something that really redeems her in some form, you know, for me to, you know, to turn my opinion on her. But yeah, I mean, she was just laying down, like, all of the truths to Gabby, you know. And Gabby was just reciting, like, all of the, you know, the same thing over and over again, like it's some inherent evil that's based within them, but it's not, you know. It's like so she's got like a kind of hypocrisy within her, you know, that, like, you know, these people who grew up, just because they grew up on this island, they can't be kind, or you know, they have to be evil because they're on the island, right? But it's just not true, you know. But yeah, so Falco being such a good kid, you know, having him be the sort of the, you know, the having him there is really, really a blessing. You know, so obviously he tells Kaya about the reasons why, just to give her a reason as to why her mother had to suffer through that, right? So yeah, I mean, It's a very cool sequence, I feel like. What else? Yeah, so talking about I was talking about before with this episode feeling like it was one that, you know, going into the topic of how they grew up and their experiences and how they shape a person to be who they are, right? That was not just across, like, obviously the way Gabby's coming across, or the way Falco is, or Kaya wanting to be like Sasha, of course, but even the girl Louise, I believe her name is the girl that Mikasa saved back in season 1, which is mad. Like episode 8 or something like that, right? Something like that. It might have been even like earlier than that. Probably was, right? But yeah, I mean, even having her come back as a way to, you know, I guess to basically focus on the way that Mikasa is feeling, because she is tied between Eren, of course, which is her whole reason for being, right? Like, that was the whole thing about her character, for the, like, you know, I mean, I'm saying like for the longest time, but it still has been almost just up until this point, where now there is like a, you know, like we're kind of seesawing in terms of, well, you know, she lives for Eren, right? But then she's got the scouts on the other hand, and now she doesn't know what to do, right? But you know, we saw her have that like sort of headache thing, which it's happened a couple times throughout the show. You know, where it's something that is sort of like ingrained in her when, you know, if she remembers something truly traumatic, which, you know, generally it was, you know, she was worried about losing people again, you know. I think the first time we saw her had it was actually in episode 1 when Carla died, and she, you know, she would hold her head, you know, and then, yeah, so it's something that does like sort of recur within her, and I think this headache is, you know, it does relate back to a traumatic experience, obviously when her parents died and then Eren, you know, showed up, but it's like the whole, you know, the point of that is like she's struggling with the idea of being kind of on one side or the other, so she kind of just stays in the middle, and it's going to be interesting to see how her story develops, and just see what she sort of ends up like, you know, if she ends up choosing a side. I guess really it's an interesting sort of development having that, because it's like this idea of like, you know, if you're talking about Paradise or Marley, and it's like, well, choose a side kind of thing, right? And it's like that whole thing. This is like just like a lesser sort of like version of it, and a choice of choosing a side, even though they're both on the same side. You know what I mean? Eren and the Scouts, of course they are, but they're doing their different things. And you know, so it is interesting that, like, you know, so Eren's locked up, right? And they locked him up because he's going out and doing his own thing, and kind of going along with his own plan. But I figured that, yeah, the idea was that he was locked up so that Hanji could figure out a plan, right? And Eren doesn't go off and continue on with whatever he was doing, right? It gives them, I figured it was something to give them time to come up with a solution to, you know, to the Historia thing and everything like that. But it's interesting that, you know, later on in that scene, well, obviously she's talking to Flock and whatnot, but she comes out and says that it was, like, Hanji, it was her plan to carry out, like, it was her decision to carry out Zeke's plan. Which that makes me confused now, because I'm sure Zeke's plan was the 3-step process, right? And the third part of that was that the Founding Titan needs to be carried down through the royal family, which means that Historia has to be sacrificed, right? But in the last episode, Hanji specifically said to Eren that I didn't think you would sacrifice Historia. Now, I guess, to some degree, maybe that is where the, you know, like the the subtitles, I guess, you know, and watching it in Japanese, that can be a flaw, maybe. Because depending on the way she says it, it can mean different things, right? Now, if it was in English, in a language that obviously I'm fluent in, that I could understand by the inflection of the way that she says it, that I understand what she means by it. Just reading something out, it doesn't, you know, like, that's something that doesn't always get across. So when she says in the last episode that I didn't think you would sacrifice Astoria, it's either, you know, like, wow, I didn't think you would actually sacrifice Astoria, or it could be, you know, I didn't think you would sacrifice Astoria, so I made the decision for you. You know, it's that, like, little sub context that you know, like, you know, that I guess it can mean two different things depending on the way that she says it. So it did kind of catch me off guard when she said it was her decision to carry it out, because that means that Hanji made the decision to sacrifice Astoria, right? Which means that everything I was talking about in the last episode was that Eren, even though, like, it seemed like he was doing a plan that he didn't want to go along with, but he had no choice, which I still think so. But I thought that involved sacrificing Astoria. So I thought that everything that Eren was doing to, you know, like, obviously he had all those years and everything like that where, you know, he was like, we'll go along with a plan that doesn't involve sacrificing Astoria. I thought eventually he was forced into that decision. Like, there was no other choice and he was running out of time, so he had to. But I'm now beginning to think that Eren is still trying to save Astoria. And that's entirely based on the fact that Hanji said here that she was the one that made the decision. Now, another way to look at it is that Hanji is not actually... Being a leader, right, means that you have to make tough decisions, tough choices, right? Which is obviously very apparent in this episode as well. And sometimes you have to shoulder responsibility for your, like, on your own shoulders, even though it might not be your problem at all. Like, well, everything's your problem, you're the leader, right? But even if you are not entirely involved in a certain aspect, like the fact that Eren is going out and doing his own thing, Hanji still shoulders responsibility for that, I'm sure. So there is that kind of thing that comes with it, and it makes me wonder whether when she said it was my decision to carry out Zeke's plan, she was just taking responsibility for Eren going out and doing that, which basically forced them into a situation where they had to carry out Zeke's plan anyway, right? Because they've already started it, kind of thing, right? So there is that element of it as well. So she could be saying that so that she shoulders responsibility like a leader is supposed to do. So it means it's like a slight kind of lie, kind of, you know. But, I mean, I don't know. It could be any of those. Could be any of those things, you know. Which is why I love this show so much. The intricacies of, like, every little thing, you know. Like, there's so much going on. There's so much meat in the story, which I really like. That was not a fucking... like phrase or pun about Sasha, by the way, fuck's sake. I literally just thought about that. The meat. God's sake. So yeah, I mean, yeah, so Gabi kills the guard fucking horrifically. They escape. And yeah, they just go out into the sticks. It's interesting that throughout the entire episode, there was never once a mention from any of the guards or parodies or whatever that they escaped. So it makes me wonder that as of right now in the story, no one's aware, right? I wouldn't be surprised if we came back next episode and the first thing they come out with is like, oh, the prisoners have escaped, and then that's what the next episode's about. But, you know, like, at the end there, Kaya basically saying that she wants to grow up to be like Sasha, which is really nice. That's heartwarming. You know, that Sasha wouldn't abandon them just like she didn't abandon me, and that, you know, because of that, she's going to take them to the Niccolo's restaurant, which you know, which might give them a sort of a ticket back home, so to speak. You know, but yeah, it's so good. I mean, it's crazy. Like you can see where the things were drawn out in the mangaka's head, where he was basically saying that the crux of, you know, basically Gabby kills Sasha, so now the way to develop her character is to basically put her in front of basically put her in a situation surrounded by characters that meant a lot to her. So obviously her family, and then go into Niccolo, who we saw a little bit in the last the episode 9, actually grew close to some degree, you know. And you know, eventually Gabby is going to find out about this, and that's when it's going to be, you know, because there has to, it is going to be tough, because remember, Gabby did literally watch Sasha take out 2 guards that were you know, fine with her. So you know, it is you know, going to be tough, but these are the situations that they find themselves in. Unfortunately for, you know, Paradis, it's like they're between a rock and a hard place, essentially. You know, they know that the war, like the world is coming to war with them. So what do? Do they sit and wait to get demolished, or do they try and fight back? You know. But I mean, that's the whole point. You know, I've said a lot that my favorite character is Armin, because he's, you know, he's very smart, and I like you know, the way that his mind works. He's very, very smart character, so I really like him. And even, you know, even Armin is at a loss, you know, because he wanted so badly for there to be a peaceful way out of this, and it got to a point where there just wasn't like, there was no way to do it, you know, because the world had already decided that they were going against them. So, you know, it's the way that it kind of ended up having to be done. One of the things that is interesting is that the Scouts, I don't think, will ever fully know about what Eren did before, you know, he transformed over in Mali. That he decided to talk with Reiner and get answers and everything like that. You know, so it's like just one of those things that, like, we are present for all of these conversations, but, you know, you don't get that crossover where the characters know about it, you know. But we know it from a meta point of view, but like certain characters don't know it because they weren't there. We've had a lot of that with perspective in this season, especially in, you know, episode 8, where, you know, just because we got the perspective of seeing Eren actually struggle with the fact that Sasha has died, you know, you could see the pain in his face. But to Connie, you know, because of where he was, only heard like a snigger, like a laugh from Eren, and then assumed that that's what it was. And obviously he talked about that in the last episode. But, you know, so it's yeah, it's interesting that, you know, those little sort of tidbits, just because of where a character's placed, means that he doesn't get the full perspective of what actually was going on. You know, so yeah, I think that's probably the word actually for this season, is perspective, right? It has to be. It's just encompasses everything about what this season's been about. So yeah. Yeah, so Gabby actually mentioned something really interesting, which is crazy to think. So that accent, that is very like sort of cowboyish, you know, what you would consider like a Southern American accent, is actually, obviously in this show, a Southern Malian accent. Which is very interesting. And we know that Sasha originally had that accent, right? But then, you know, changed it up, like in the very first season. Of course, we didn't learn about it until season 2. But, you know, yeah, she did have that accent beforehand, which is interesting. And it makes me wonder that, like, I know that the Browse family were kind of out of the way of other people, you know, like, so, you know, they almost had their own culture about, you know, the way that they were kind of living and, you know, living off the land and everything. It's like they had their own culture, and wherever they got that from would be interesting to know. But also it makes me wonder, is Sasha, or what was Sasha, even Eldian? You know? That's an interesting thing. It's like, because it had to have been passed down from somewhere, the accent, right? But it is interesting. The fact that, you know, if we're obviously truly to believe that King Fritz obviously took Eldian people and over to Paradise, that why would Marlians go along with them? There must have been something like that at some point. But yeah, it does make you question because of, like, you know, things, you know, it could be a Marlian, you know, like slash Eldian family tree. Could be that, you know. So to some degree Sasha will be Eldian, but it could also not be, and she might not even be Eldian at all. Which is interesting, because that means she would never have been able to become a Titan if she wasn't, you know. And considering the last episode where they were in talks and Sasha was like, I'll take it, you know, I'll take your Titan powers off you, and I'll carry the burden. But if she was Marlian, she wouldn't be able to do that. But it is interesting that, like, that, you know, it's a Southern Marlian accent. That very interesting. So yeah, the Hizuru have created a new aircraft, which is what they're very proficient in, right? Is aircraft and weapons, right? And that they've actually created an aircraft with the resources that was on Paradise, so the Iceburst Stone. And it's very dragon shaped by the looks of it, but it looks fucking cool. I can't wait to see how it works. You know, I mean, obviously it works with fuel and everything like that, but it's going to be interesting to see, like, how, you know, because this is, it's almost being used as, like, sort of like a, the way that they're talking about it sounds like a prototype, but they're going to be using it to look at the rumbling from up top so that they're safe, right? But almost like, you know, because they're trying to build Paradise's military as well, that we could be looking at a situation that, you know, they have the best aircraft in the world with this Iceburst Stone, you know. I mean, it makes sense that, you know, to some degree, Paradise have to have some advantage because the entire world is against them, right? So, if they've got the best aircraft in the game, then it could fucking, you know, it could turn the tide to a more balanced, you know what I mean? I mean, you know, aside from the fact that obviously they've got the rumbling, but the part of the plan was that, you know, until they don't need it anymore, right? So they can't just rely entirely on that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this test. So Hanji basically wanted the Shiganshina to be evacuated because I guess that's where they're going to test it. I don't think they're going to, you know, tear down the whole walls. I think that would be insane, you know, but I think they're just going to use the walls of Shiganshina, so the, you know, that one bit that juts out, I think they will probably just use that wall, right? Just to test them with a few. I mean, it'll be more than a few, I imagine, but, you know, to test it out, it is going to be interesting. But they have to bring out Eren out of prison, and of course Zeke's going to have to be there because they're going to have to be close to each other, of course, to make this work. Because if something bad goes, like, horribly wrong, like if they're split up somehow, they're not going to be able to be controlled, and they're going to start eating people. So yeah, God, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. It is interesting to note that, like, how did they manage to make so many colossal titans, you know? Like, what was the difference there in that? Like, is it somehow formed from colossal titans? Like, if you know what I mean. Like, is it a case of getting serum from a colossal titan, and if you inject that into an Eldian, they become more colossal-like? You know? It would be interesting to know. Because otherwise I don't know how they do that then, you know? Because it seems like every time somebody, you know, is... like when someone becomes a Titan, it doesn't seem like there's any... You know, it seems like it's mostly random what happens, kind of thing, you know? I mean, they look like their human selves to a degree, but it seems as though, like, they just come out of random sizes. So, you know, it's just interesting to just think how they would have done it if every single Titan in the wall is essentially a colossal Titan, because there would be, considering how big the walls are. You know, I mean, we've seen the image of, like, you know, back in episode 5, I believe, where it's like when they're talking about all of the colossal titans in the walls will basically flatten the earth, and you see them, they all look like the colossal titan with that, like, sort of muscular type, you know, red form and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. What else? Yeah, so Flock released the information about Eren. Louise was a part of that as well, because again, how she grew up, that the whole, like, that whole time, like, when Mikasa saved her, that's what she understood about that one moment, and she's grown up to believe that way. You know, so she's fully backing Eren as well, because she just sees it from the perspective of what she did back then when Mikasa had to save her, you know. So in some ways she wants to be strong like Mikasa is. You know, so there's that. Kaya and the orphans. So yeah, the other two were orphans as well, which is interesting, and that Historia had a part to play in that, of course, because she was involved with the orphanage and everything like that. And you know, Sasha's uncle and auntie, I imagine. I don't, you know, pretty much. They've opened up their house to these orphans as well. Kaya was the obvious one, but these other orphans, I don't know if they came much later. I imagine so, because Kaya was in season 2, and Historia didn't become a queen until season 3. So, you know, I imagine Kaya was there beforehand, but yeah. And then pretty much after the episode ended, in the after credit scene, I should say, we went over to Mali, where all of the warriors are there. They've all healed up, and they're having a meeting. And Magath knows that Zeke betrayed them, based on the fact of there was just arms and legs there. Now, I'm going to just check, just to make sure that I didn't actually, like, miss something. Because, yeah. Basically, it was like there was just pieces of him, his arms and legs, and there wasn't any torso or head or anything like that. So they just assumed that he betrayed them and went to Paradise based on that. I mean, Magath was there when Levi threw the grenade thing to blow him up. So it's mad to think. Although, I guess if we go back to episode 2, I think, of this season, there was that moment where they were listening in on the warriors' conversations and stuff, right? So they must have had maybe suspicions before then, and then that's how they've come to this conclusion. So that's how they know. But it is interesting now with Reiner knowing that, and how he's, you know, he's like so upfront about it, about going there now and not waiting 6 months for the Global Alliance, is what they're calling it, to attack. It's interesting just seeing him so concerned about it, because of obviously how it seems like he had given up But it's still going to be interesting, like, if they do go through with this. I imagine they will. I imagine they will not wait 6 months and actually, I guess they all would go. Like Cold, Reiner, Peak, and Galliard. I'm sure they would all probably will go. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to just see how Reiner actually, like, what he actually does when he turns up there. You know, if he's going to revert back to kind of like that kind of, you know, not really, his heart isn't really in it anymore. Only to go there just to save Falco and Gabby, possibly. You know, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got. So yeah, very interesting indeed. The people want Eren free. You know, they were obviously kept under wraps about what was actually going on with Eren, but you know, just learning that he was in prison, they're like very shocked to learn that, and that, you know, they see Eren as their savior, you know, so yeah, it's mad. But yeah, so they brought up that one dude who has been not really close with Hanji, but they have had that moment back in the first half of season 3 where Hanji pretty much saved him, right, and whatnot, and he took over the company that the one dude got killed by Kenny, I think that was right, yeah. So that dude's father died, right, while he was taking a piss. I think that's when we learn about Levi being an Ackerman as well, that one scene. But yeah, so obviously the reins were handed over to him, and they flourished. They did very well for themselves, and that you mentioned in this episode, they were in charge of rebuilding Shiganshina after the whole attack and everything like that. So I imagine they did get, like, eventually just rebuild it. It didn't sound like they were still ongoing with it, but yeah, it's interesting just having, like, you know, him show up as well at that point, in the same episode that we learn about Louise, which is, if you remember, when Mikasa saved Louise and all of those people, it was that dude's father that was blocking it up. Do you remember? I'm sure it was. So it's interesting just having those two, like, come up, like, again in this one episode, you know. But yeah, it's a definitely interesting episode on, you know, on the perspective and everything like that, and hopefully the start of the character development change for Gabby, right? Because yeah, I was still sitting here seething a bit. But anyway, yeah, that is all I've got. So apologies if I have missed anything. There's always so much going on in each episode that it's hard to take everything down in one, like, you know, the scene at once. So yeah, that is all I've got anyway. So thank you everyone for watching. In the description below I have links to certain things. One of them is the Discord, so you can get yourself over there if you wish. And I also have a Patreon page as well, so if you do want to support me on Patreon, that'd be very much appreciated. There is a bunch of different tiers and rewards there, like early access, $5 a month. That gives you access to shows a week early. And there's also the full-length tier as well, so if you want to watch any of my reactions in full and not just the cut 10-minute versions, then the offer is there for you for that. And then there is the exclusive tier, which gives you access to the full-length movie reactions and everything like that. I just released the start of Fate Heaven's Feel, the first movie, last week, and of course I'm going to be doing the second movie and the third movie as well soon. So yeah, if you know, you want to watch my full-length reaction to movies, then that is there for you as well. But that is all I've got. So thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.